Great stuff. I'll keep my beady eye on the chat, so if anybody wants to fire in questions, then please do so. And so we'll get a PowerPoint going. And then also do some demonstrations. So digital literacy, I've decided that we'll call it inclusive digital literacy, since that's the context that we're going to be working in. Immediately, why is this wretched thing not going on? For goodness sake. Right, we'll just have to do the best we can with this. So Call Scotland, I'll give you a quick introduction just in case you don't know who we are. And we're based at the University of Edinburgh. And our business is assistive technology for learners with additional support needs. We've got a multidisciplinary team with backgrounds in different areas of assistive technology and ASN. We spend about a third of our time going to pupils and seeing if we can help try and identify appropriate assistive technology. So for example, this morning I was in Irvine, and on Monday I was in Inverness. We do quite a lot of information provision of all sorts of different sorts and different ways. So anybody can phone us up, and we've got some websites. Professional learning, I suppose that's what we're doing here. Strategic leadership is what we try and do with Scottish Government and Education Scotland. So I guess this is also part of strategic leadership. We do a small amount of research and development, and we do some technical services. These are our websites, which I'll take you through in a second. But it's just to say that there's quite a few on different topics. As I say, the information and advice is free, so anyone can phone us up from anywhere in Scotland. So and just give us a call or get in touch with our contact form on the website. We're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram as well, and so we try and respond that way if that's your preference. This is our professional learning offering, and it's now kind of quite varied. We used to just do mainly day courses, but now we've got everything from these 20-minute Wednesday webinars, which are free, and then in-person training, so we can come to your school or your local authority, or do online training. We've got some online modules, which are £20 a time, I think. We've kind of about to give up on doing single 1-hour courses, and instead we think that it's going to be more appropriate, more effective to run some longer online courses. So next year, next term rather, we're going to have our usual 5-week technology and dyslexia course. And we're also going to add another one just purely around the topic of digital assessment arrangements for SQA, because I'm thinking that will be quite popular. We're currently running a course on literacy for learners with complex learning needs, which we'll repeat again next year. And we're hoping to have an AAC course, so that's a communication support needs course. So that's the professional learning. We also, as I say, provide assessment and support, and this is all funded by local authorities. But I think we're going to, and almost always we get referrals from local authorities. So we've got contracts or arrangements, partnership agreements with 19 of the 32 Scottish local authorities. And that means that we can go out to schools and take a pile of kit and work with the local team to try and find something that's effective. Now, we can't, the number of days that we've got with local authorities is very small. Typically, maybe say 10 days a year. So we can't do that a lot. And there's a massive unmet need. So as we go through today, one of the things that's exercising our minds is definitely what do we need in Scotland when it comes to support for these kind of learners. Most of the learners in these slides have got quite significant complex additional support needs, and sometimes they need quite specialist quite a specialist response. So the chap on the left is using eye gaze, the wee girl at the top is using a switch operated by her head. And so hopefully you have people in your local authorities that have got the skills and the expertise and the technology, because you can't actually try this stuff out, obviously, unless you've got the kit. But I don't know what the best way of doing this is, but I suspect that we're not doing it as best we can across Scotland. So I think we'll be trying to contact and pick your brains about what actually Scotland needs. A new colleague just joined us a few weeks ago, and she came with me to Irvine today, and she was saying what we need is a Call Scotland everywhere in all parts of Scotland. And I was thinking, yeah, exactly, that's right, because in too many places there's one person that's responsible, and it's virtually impossible to cover the full range of what we do if they're just one of you. So we definitely need more people and more local authorities to have the have this specialism. Anyway, let's think about digitally literate learners and teachers, because that's today's topic. Now it's a professional learning, so I'm going to concentrate on what digitally literate teachers should be able to do rather than learners. So I've taken a few examples from the Education Scotland materials here, and I've picked out items which are particularly related to inclusion or accessibility. So here's essential teacher skills. So these are the things everyone should absolutely know how to do. And one of them is to access and use common accessibility features such as text size, text to speech, or speech input. And if you're making anything, consider the copyright of any content or media included in created content. We'll come back to the copyright question in a minute. Now just let me, now how do you do that? Well, if you're in a Microsoft authority, if you use Windows, the Microsoft accessibility, the Windows accessibility tools are actually very, very good, and so are their online supports. So if that's your circumstance, one of the best ways of doing it actually is to head off to just do a Google search for Microsoft accessibility, and I think you'll be astonished at the things that you can actually do. And Microsoft have also got some really good educator videos and tutorials. Apple are the same. So Google search for iPad accessibility, and again there's astonishing things that we can do with iPads, and the same thing with Chromebook. So here we've got google.co.uk accessibility, and a pupil listening to some content with text to speech. Now the Education Scotland framework talks about essential, and then core, and then enhanced. So core teacher skills, still the kind of thing that are core, I suppose. Teachers should be able to demonstrate the general accessibility to features. And so in order to do that, we all need to know how to, the basic things that should be available. Slightly more involved is to evaluate the learner needs and suggest a digital feature that might support this, such as text to speech for someone that might have a reading difficulty, and identify where support or guidance is provided from accessibility specific organisations such as Call Scotland. So, that means what do we need to do? We need to know a little bit about what's available on our devices, and we need to be skilled enough, I suppose, to show them to pupils if you've got a chance. And, it might not be everybody's responsibility in the school, because class teachers have got loads and loads of things to do, but this is what I suppose Education Scotland are hoping that we can work towards. And of course, in a situation where we've got 34.2%, has it gone up, of learners with an identified additional support need, this is no longer specialist stuff. This is, everyone needs to know about it. More core teacher skills are to understand the key features of platforms, apps or services, and to be able to create resources by adding text, images, videos, web links, and use formatting and editing tools to improve them. And then knowing about the design of the content that you're creating, both with the type of language that's being used or images, and just being aware that some learners might be accessing it on different types of device. And so a good example here would be Immersive Reader. If you're working in an authority that uses the Microsoft Office tools, and I'm sure you've done, if you've ever used Word, then sometimes the materials that we make, if you view it in Immersive Reader, they don't necessarily work very well. If you've got lots of images plastered all over the shop to try and make it a pretty engaging, visually engaging thing, quite often when you view it in Immersive Reader, it doesn't work too well. Another example would be Canva, which a lot of people are using, and it's utterly brilliant for producing posters and learning resources. But it's just not very good if you're a blind person, a blind people, and you try and read a Canva item with a screen reader. It's just going to be a disaster. So, if that's maybe an unusual situation, but just being aware that sometimes some things need to be made accessible, and we'll have a few examples of these as we go. So we've got essential, core, and enhanced, and here teachers should strive to produce resources that meet the needs of learners, considering personalisation and choice, including accessibility tools, and where they can be used to foster independent learning. We should be providing resources that are accessible to learners, considering use of voice typing, text-to-speech reading, and other features to best match to the learner's needs. Consider how the learners will access the resources. Use content that's visually appealing and multimodal, and are clear and concise. So it sounds like quite a tall order, but I think most teachers do this anyway. There might be one or two tweaks, that are required, but typically this is second nature to most teachers. And again, a good example would be are your materials, can they be accessed with text to speech? Can you view them in Immersive Reader if you're in a Google context? Can the people change easily change the appearance of your Google Slides or your Google Docs to suit them? I'll just move this out the way. And our last one here is assessment. So teachers should strive to create assessments that are accessible for learners, match assessments to learning activity, and use devices with assessment. And I suppose the classic example here would be the use of digital question papers for learners with additional support needs. And I guess that applies to internal assessments as well. Now, one of the things I wanted to introduce at this point is a staged intervention triangle that we're trying to create, or try to develop, or try to promote. And we've been trying to think about how assistive technology and inclusive digital education, digital learning fit, and how we can organise it. So I don't know, Martin, can you say, is this big enough for people to see?
It looks okay on my screen. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Your other option that you could try, I know it can be see the present with Teams button that you've got just in the top corner there. If you try that, that should kind of click it across, that you can then
make it bigger.
Yeah.
I'll try that. Sorry about this, folks. I did try it earlier on.
Yeah, it can. PowerPoint and Teams can be a bit funny sometimes. Try stop sharing your screen, and then right, and then.
Do you see it now?
No, it's black on my screen. I'm not sure about anyone else's.
Right. I will stop sharing.
Yeah, and then reshare and see if that works. Yeah, I sometimes find it funny, especially if you've got an external monitor connected as well. That can sometimes throw it a bit out of whack. Certainly see the web page is okay.
Grown. Stop sharing.
Yeah, I had an issue on Monday with mine where every time I went to play my presentation, it crashed Teams. So I just had to do the same thing. I just had to present on the slides and just it was beyond frustrating. There we go.
Is that coming through?
Yeah, right. That's coming through perfect now.
Right, I'll crack on to where we were. Aye, so sorry about that. Now, one of the things about this is it's kind of taking off, picking up at the point that more and more learners have got technology in schools and a personal device. And so what does that look like? Well, personal device, the built-in accessibility tools that we talked about that are within the Education Scotland teacher skills, accessible digital learning resources, and then who's responsible for knowing about this? Well, I think it's every teacher, actually, every ASL teacher in service, every pupil support practitioner. So it's quite a big job for everyone to be aware of that, but I think that's what we should be aiming for. At the more targeted level, this is maybe where we're talking about some of the children that Call Scotland gets involved to go see, where it's maybe something a bit more specialist. And then at this, but still not specialist. And then at the specialist level, we're talking about stuff that you don't see very often, and learners with really quite complex needs. But I think I like this. Well, I like it because I invented it. But what I'm hoping is that we can actually use this to help us think about who's responsible. Because, as I say, I think in some local authorities we do need to have a bit more people. Rather than Call Scotland traipsing around, more people locally who have got the skills and the equipment and the expertise. Now, I just want to say something briefly about the Equality Act and the technical guidance for schools in Scotland does have words to say about accessible learning resources and access to IT. So I've just picked a few key points here. So a school's obligation to pupils covers everything, all school activities, as well as facilities like library and IT. And the duty requires us to take reasonable steps to avoid a substantial disadvantage to disabled people. And it also requires schools to take positive steps to ensure that people can not be discriminated against. They point out that many reasonable adjustments are inexpensive and will often involve a change of practice rather than necessarily buying things that are expensive. And I think that's particularly true now because, the digital learning environment is now so common and, people more and more, teachers more and more are using digital methods. And so if you're preparing resources with Microsoft Word, then it's much easier to to change the font or just give the digital file to the people so that they can change the font or just zoom in and make it bigger. So that's much easier than it used to be maybe 10 years ago. And it's an anticipatory one. And so schools need to be thinking about in advance what kind of resources the pupils will require. And so an example of what's a substantial disadvantages is something like this. They give an example. A visually impaired pupil who can only see material in 16 point or larger will be at a substantial disadvantage compared to non-disabled pupils if materials are provided in a smaller print size. So it's a reasonable adjustment, basically, in the eyes of the Equality Act to provide a pupil with a visual impairment or a physical disability or a reading difficulty with an accessible resource. That's really what we're saying. And elsewhere we read consideration should be given to whether classwork or homework could be provided in alternative forms. So with that in mind, we'll have a think about one pupil just to think about how we do that. And this is Sophia, who I met on Monday. She's in S3. She's doing really well with schoolwork, and she's obviously just starting her National Fives. She's particularly keen on drama and art, And in fact, she said that she was recently taking part in some filming for the Dog Squad CPB's thing. I've never seen it myself, but it sounds great fun. She's got an assistant who gives her a hand in class, and she's got a personal Chromebook, as you can see there. Now, the brief here was that Sophia would like to be as independent as possible. And one of the barriers to that is that it's really hard work for her to be at school. You know, she takes a huge amount of energy to do that. And so she does rely quite heavily on her support. And so the referral to call was to try and find ways primarily to help her to be more independent and to reduce this fatigue. And the educational psychologist pointed out or suggested that Sophia would benefit from access to an electronic or scanned version of her textbooks because she just can't manage a traditional textbook herself. So with that in mind, we ask ourselves, well, where do we get digital textbooks? And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing this and go over to just show you really. We're going to look first of all at Books for All and then at RNIB Bookshare. So I'm hoping that you can see this on screen, can you?
Yep, all fine.
Jolly good. So this is the Books for All website. If you just do a Google search for Books for All, then you can find it. And it's free for any teachers in Scotland. And so if you wanted to create a free account, you just go to free account, and I'll log in if I can remember my email. Oh, for goodness sake. Would you believe it? I'm not going to spend any time, waste anybody's time, because I've just had a brain freeze and I can't even remember my own account. I'll show you what it looks like once we've got in. One of the books that Sophia was using is the TJ Maths book 3A. And so this is what it looks like on screen. And I'll go to, so we've got Microsoft Edge here, and this is just the PDF. And we'll open it up on screen. And for Sophia, she can use her Chromebook or Windows device, or in fact an iPad. So at the very least, it means that she can go up and down the screen, and that's a huge improvement for her, because that's just something that means that she's a bit more independent. And also with all of these tools, then you can click and type a number in, and you can also use a text-to-speech tool. So if I select some text and then click play, I'm just thinking, Martin, did I click the share sound button before I did this?
I can't hear anything coming through. You could try it again. I did hear something faint, but
I think it's just picking up on by. I'm conscious of the time because we're finishing at 1:45, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll stop sharing and I'll go back in and do it again. Why not? So share.
Loads of time.
Include the sound. Go to the screen. Yeah, so we've got in Edge, Microsoft Edge, we've either got the read aloud tool that's built in. Once it loads up. And one of the reasons I'm not terribly keen on the read aloud tool in Edge is because it quite often just takes ages to do anything. So if it's not going to do anything in the near time, I'll just stop it. So I'm going to use a thing called Natural Reader instead. And I'm going to choose a voice that isn't French.
Round to the nearest 1,000.
Did that come through?
Yep, that was fine.
Good. So select text, click play.
Round to the nearest 1,000.
Are you selecting the right thing, Mr. Nisbet?
Write the number that comes.
Okay, so Natural Reader, and as I say, interacting with the PDF by typing in, or one can do a bit of drawing with this as well. Now, so that's on Windows, and we can do exactly the same thing on a Chromebook or an iPad. Once it loads up. So this is Kami, which is a free PDF reader for Chromebook, also runs on Windows. And for some reason, it's not, honestly. I just did this 2 minutes ago. Pathetic. But the point I want to make is that you can get your digital textbooks from either Books for All or RNIB. So I want to go back and show you how it works. This is RNIB Bookshare, and if you do nothing else, go and have a look, because if you've got any learners that have got print disabilities, so that's an inability or a struggle to access textbooks or digital materials, then RNIB Bookshare is really what you want. They've now got over 1 million files there, and almost every academic textbook that's available in the UK is on RNIB Bookshare. So for somebody like Sophia, it's absolutely brilliant. So I'll do a search. It was TJ Book 3A that she's requiring, and we can do a search. And here we've got all the textbooks. So if I just go to the pupils account that I've created, and then go to our home page, and then I've created a reading list, and you can have several, but for this one, it's one for maths. And there's the book that I've already pre-prepared for her. Now, she doesn't have to do this herself, of course, an assistant could do it. But once she's found the book, she can open it up on her PC or her Chromebook or her iPad and have access to it. So it's really kind of as easy as that. And from the teacher's end of it, what I've done here is just I've assigned books to her. And if I wanted to find another one, like presumably she's going to be going on to 3B any minute now. I could do a search for TJ and find the one that she wants. And as you can see, they've got virtually all of them up here. And then we can just assign it to Sophia's reading list. And it really is a brilliant system. And what's more, it's free. So if you don't already have Bookshare and an account, then have a search for it. These are the steps that you need to go through. And the first one I'll just draw to your attention because this relates back to the copyright question. Bookshare books can only be provided to learners that are either blind and partially sighted or have some other kind of learning challenge that makes it difficult to read. So dyslexia is included in that, and ASD, and particularly, you know, a cortical visual impairment type challenge if you want to change the size or the colours, and also for somebody like Sophia, a physical disability she's unable to hold or manipulate a book or turn the pages, but if we put it on the screen for her, then she can manage to do that. So I'll go back to the PowerPoint. So they know I won't. Before I do that, I will I did have this all set up to be dead slick, but you wouldn't think so, would you? So I just wanted to mention as well about Kindle, because PDFs are all very well, but one of the great things about a commercial Kindle book or an iBook, you know, from Apple or Google Play, is that when you go to the text, so this is a fantastic book. If you've not come across it, I Can Write, and it's written by a young man called Jonathan Bryan, and it's if you do again a Google search for him, get the book and just be inspired because it's absolutely fantastic. But what I wanted to just say is that with the Kindle, whenever you make things bigger, it always wraps to the page. Whereas I'm sure you found that if you make a PDF bigger on screen, it doesn't, you know, sometimes it gets so big that you've got to scroll horizontally to get to it. And so it's not so good for learners that have got a challenge with and who require a really large font. And Kindle has also got text to speech built in, so it's kind of nice and simple and straightforward. So I suppose the message is just to bear in mind the commercial ebooks as well as Bookshare. Another thing about the commercial ebooks, of course, is you're not limited to providing them to children that are print disabled. So anyone in the school can buy a Kindle book, or you can buy a Kindle book for anyone in the school. Maybe that's another way of doing it. So that's ebooks. And on to remember we said earlier that a digital skill for a teacher would be to create accessible assessments. And I'm sure you know an example of that would be the SQA digital question papers, which are available for Windows. You can access them on iPads using these apps. Works very well indeed. And also on Chromebook using Orbit, Note or Kami. But you'll probably know that actually managing Chromebooks and iPads in schools is a real problem. And so, you know, we've certainly been working with some schools and suppliers of software to try and find a solution to this. And we're not there yet. So I suppose just watch this space, and next session where we hope to have something that can actually be used if you're in a Chromebook or an iPad authority. If we're wanting to make our own accessible digital learning resources. There's a poster on our website, just asking the question, are your learning resources accessible to all learners? And there's an online learning module, which is also about creating accessible documents that I would point out to you. So we won't go into it here, but there's if you use Microsoft Word, the modern version anyway, it's got an accessibility checker, and there's loads of information, again on Microsoft and Apple and Google about how to create accessible documents, or you could possibly take this online professional learning module on the Call Scotland website. Now, I do want to say a wee bit about the learner digital skills, and so one of them, I suppose, is just kind of common sense, isn't it? Learners all need to be taught how to use this stuff, and quite often I think we forget that. So the pupil that I went to see this morning, he's got a significant communication challenge, and so we're exploring. He's got a big iPad Pro that you can access, and we were exploring different types of communication apps, but there's no way that you can just leave it with him and swan off and expect him and the classroom assistant. It's just not fair to to get to grips with it. And the same thing I think is true for any learner. They are, children typically speaking are astonishing in what they can do with their iPad or their Chromebook. That doesn't necessarily mean that they can actually use it for for schoolwork. So here's an example. This is a good example of some skills, short-term targets rather, that were in one of the pupils that I went to meet, and so I think by putting them into the IEP, then obviously it's more likely that they'll actually happen, and that someone will teach the child how to do it. So good things, I can use my microphone function to talk for text. I can use it to add punctuation. I can use the iPad to photograph a section into text and read back to listen to the passage. So this is a pupil that's got quite a significant literacy challenge. I think he was primary 7. And so that, I think that's just an excellent example. Here's another one from another pupil, and this is where we could tweak it a bit. So the original IEP target was at the top. I can use my phonic and decoding skills to read a short passage of writing specifically selected to support my reading level. Now this person I think was 10 and had a reading level of about 6. So that's good, because what we're doing, of course, is trying to develop independent, unaided reading. But if he's got a reading age of 6, he's going to be stuck, when it comes to some materials that are at his academic or his chronological age of 10. So we could add a few more targets that use technology, such as I can use my iPad text reader skills to read a short passage of writing at my curriculum level. And that means that, the pupil can still participate and try and hopefully keep up with the rest of the class. So really just skills for the pupil, and also creating accessible learning resources. And in the last couple of minutes, I just want to just think about learners who can't typically manage, a PDF or a Kindle book, or a Google Doc or a Word file. So specialist accessible formats. What would these be? The most likely one, I think, is Braille. So nobody is expecting class teachers to create materials in hard copy Braille. That's definitely a job for, our specialist practitioners, our qualified teachers of the visually impaired, and that's why local authorities usually have qualified teachers of the visually impaired, and hopefully a process for creating Braille materials. Braille is maybe less common these days now that we've got, Braille electronic displays and screen readers, but there's still loads of pupils that, who are blind or significantly visually impaired who rely on Braille. And it's right, of course, isn't it? That they should be able to have their learning materials in a format that's accessible to them. But there's other types of resource which are maybe less common. This is in a program called Grid, and it's an example of a resource that I created for somebody who is blind, but can only work 2 switches. And effectively, it's just like an audio book, so you can listen to each of the parts of the resource with a switch, and as he clicks on, it automatically comes back to him. And this is basically an accessible version of a PowerPoint that the teacher was using that I created. And another example would be eye gaze. So on the left-hand side here, we've got this is a BookBug book, but we've recreated it in Grid. And I don't know if you know, but Grid's one of the programs that you would use for a lot of learners who use eye gaze technology, because it's got really nice big targets and you can basically do anything you want with this. So it's definitely a specialist format, but it's like Braille. Some people need Braille, some young people need Grid. And I suppose what I'm thinking, and maybe suggesting to us all, is that we do employ qualified teachers of the visually impaired or transcribing editors to create Braille resources, and we should probably be employing similarly skilled people, but a different set of skills, to create resources in things like Grid or indeed Clicker, because this is a skilled task. It's you have to spend a long time learning how to do it. And so I'd like to stop there and see if there's any questions.
Nothing so far, Paul. I've just put the links to Books for All and to the RNIB bookstore. I'm going to stop recording there because we obviously got the main body, but that was excellent.